I don't love sometimes when content creators that I even enjoy might present something as objective when there's actually differing opinions on that. So like, oh, you have to do this with your syntax in SQL. And it's like, you make a really good point on why someone should do that, but there are some other people that will like laugh at you if you write your syntax like that. You can teach yourself data analytics fully enough to get an entry-level job using entirely free resources. And then the hard part, in my opinion, comes when you're actually just trying to get that job. But at least on a skill standpoint, you can teach yourself these really cool skills for free.
I asked you offline what's an important truth that many people probably don't agree with you on. And you had said that it's actually hard to change people's minds. Can you expand on what that means?
Even myself, over time, I've like changed opinions on various things that at one point I would look at people that have my opinions that I currently do now. I'm like, what are they even thinking? Like, truly baffled me. Like, I'm like, the evidence all seems to point in my direction. So what on earth are they thinking? Now it's easy for me to like look back the other way. I'm like, empirically, I'm correct. So like, it's even hard when there's data present because I think a lot of people can find the data that can somewhat, whether realistically or deceptively, prove what they believe.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is powered by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Elijah Butler. So Elijah is a data analyst who's also developed an impressive following on TikTok for his short form, informative, data-related content. Elijah and I had a really good conversation about one, how he grew his audience, two, how he gets over the overwhelm of a lot of things associated with the data career, and three, a little bit about his understanding of people's ability to change and their willingness to change, and how we both wrestle with that as content creators. I really enjoyed this conversation with Elijah, and I know you will as well. Elijah, welcome to the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. Happy to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this was an awesome intro from Alex the Analyst. Obviously, you're blowing up in the short form content space on data analytics, TikTok. And I wanted to bring you in, one, to learn your story and maybe, steal some secrets of how to excel in the short form content world.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to share anything I have. Basically, if you listen to this whole podcast, you got to get that average watch time up. If you listen to this whole podcast, by the end, you'll be able to go viral on TikTok with every video you post.
Every single time, 100% of the time, without any, no duds, no slumps.
Oh yeah, and you'll have 100% conversion rate on any call to actions in your video too.
To be clear, this is satire. This is not financial advice. I'm just kidding. So Elijah, the way I like to get people familiar with all of the guests is to learn a little bit about your first experience with data. So what got you interested in the data domain? Was there a singular moment, a singular experience, or has it been more of a slow progression over time?
Yeah, so it was kind of probably a slow progression while I was in college. I started my college career and finished it at Western Kentucky University. I actually started as a mechanical engineering major, and after a year of that, I found that wasn't really for me. I've always been really into business, whether it be business books or watching Shark Tank. So I decided to switch over to marketing the next semester. And that semester, I took a marketing class, 2 econ classes, a CIS class, and an accounting class, I think. And after that semester, I kind of found econ was a better fit. So I decided to switch my major once again to business economics. And that's kind of where I started getting introduced to data. I had my first econ statistics class, which was things like p-values, hypothesis testing, all of that fun stuff that makes like other people like want to pull their hair out. But if you're a data nerd like me, you're just like, oh, this is awesome. And then I got I had a econometrics class as a part of my undergrad, and that's where I got introduced to topics like regression analysis and everything that kind of has to go with that. And as part of the college I was in, they had this jump program where you could double up your classes and take harder versions of the classes to get grad credit. So I ended up doing that program. And then a year after getting my undergrad degree in business econ, I finished my applied econ degree. And that one, I had like a forecasting class that was all sorts of regression analysis, time series forecasting, all this cool stuff in R. I had a couple classes that were focused on using SAS and Python. So, really, a bigger data science background before I even really knew what data analytics was. And I'm a data analyst now.
So so that was like a master's in econ, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I had a bachelor's in business economics and then I did the jump program. So a year later, I was able to finish a master's in applied economics.
Very cool. So how did you find that applied economics fit into that career path of the data analyst or data scientist? How did you bridge that gap? What was your early career jump into the field looking like?
Yeah, so it was not as straight as I would think because neither of my degrees, like I didn't even know what SQL was when I graduated. I hadn't used Tableau or Power BI, all three of which are very big in the analytics space. So I think when I graduated college, I was looking initially for some. I think I applied probably to some data science jobs because I would see R, Python listed, and I had those on my resume. And then I just applied to a ton of different random jobs. I had a couple random jobs out of college, including kind of a random grocery job and finance job. And it was kind of while having those jobs, I stumbled onto Alex the Analyst on YouTube and maybe a couple other sources. And that's kind of when I learned about analytics and started teaching myself some of the skills online.
That's really cool. So, how did you approach learning some of those skills, whether it's SQL, whether it's Tableau? Was that just watching YouTube videos?
It
And
was
then how do you, yeah, good.
go ahead.
And was it just watching YouTube videos and applying them, or how did you showcase that these were something that you could do in a business setting, not just on your own?
Yeah, so learning the skills, the Khan Academy SQL course is one of the big ones I recommend, and that was probably my biggest, where I learned the most before I got my first analyst job. And then Alex the Analyst for further SQL learning, and I think maybe I'd used a couple other random SQL courses. I was honestly blessed. Like it was easy. I always say this on my TikTok. It was easier for me to get that first analyst job than others because I had regression analysis projects and I had a master's degree. So I honestly didn't even have a portfolio whenever I first applied for analyst jobs. So I more used my college experience to help show, like I would talk about my projects that I'd done in college rather than even talking much about my SQL experience. And then for SQL, it was just talking about like uh, I guess the course projects. They're not quite projects, but in the Khan Academy, you have like these little, I guess projects is the best word. And I talked about those, but I think my university experience was probably more impressive.
Interesting, interesting. So, in that light, what can people do to get the most out of their university experience? I think myself, quite a few other people probably had different experiences where, I was an econ major out of college as well. I didn't get grad degrees until years later, but I didn't feel like my college work really helped me a whole lot in the job market. It wasn't until grad school where some of those projects were useful. But I also see quite a few people having good success with this out of even undergrad. What's the difference between the ones that have success in finding jobs leveraging their schoolwork and people that don't?
Yeah, so I think about anything you're going to study in college, if you're a good student, it's all valuable learning, but some of that valuable learning is more marketable than others. So I learned a lot of great things when I was taking microeconomic theory and macroeconomic theory, but if you're applying for an analyst job or really most jobs, like that, you're not going to be drawing a demand graph in an interview or anything. So I think it can be really good to focus on building a portfolio with more of hard skills than soft skills. Soft skills are important, but when you're applying for jobs, they want to see that you, in my opinion, they want to see that you have the skills for whatever job you're applying for. So if it's data analytics, they're going to want to see the SQL, data visualization, and Excel. If you want to go that way, you can throw in some Python and R. So I think if you were like a data analytics major, being able to showcase all of those skills is very beneficial. And then more so for college as a whole and getting the most out of it, I think one of the greatest benefits of college is the network that you build. In networking, I think isn't really that much different than friendships. Like I haven't gotten my jobs mainly from like connections that I knew, but when you go to college and you meet a lot of people that are going to go get corporate jobs at Apple and at consulting firms and wherever, that can be really valuable. So I think it can be great to join clubs, whatever you're interested in. Then I also think it can look really good on a resume to try to get positions in those clubs, like president, treasurer, whichever.
Yeah, that's great advice. Something that I did in college and in grad school that I didn't really see anyone else doing. Maybe it's some might think I was kind of a loser for this, but I absolutely wore out office hours, and I became pretty good friends with quite a few of the professors that I had. So I'd still go back even after I finished their courses, and I got recommended quite a few internships from the professors themselves, especially if they're adjunct professors and not necessarily, like tenured professors who have more of a network. There's a lot of really good opportunities through that. And I would argue, since I've been a college professor myself now, that a lot of the students don't necessarily share the same passion for the domain that you do. And if you find a student that really does share that passion for what you're learning, it's really easy and you really genuinely want to help them out. Most college professors spent the majority of their lives focusing on a domain, and they're obviously passionate about it, even if it doesn't get to come across in their lectures. So just showing and just genuine care and interest can really help build those relationships. Also, you're paying for the college professors. That's part of your tuition. Just use them. You're wasting money if you're not going to office hours. That was a big thing for me. I could not believe how few people just didn't use the resources or the access that they had. Absolutely mind-boggling. But
I couldn't agree with that more. That's a really good point. Especially, I think a lot of professors, I think a lot of students will come in when there's 2 weeks left of the semester and have a 48 in the class, and are like, okay, how do I get this to an A? And it's like, it would have been nice if you had came in here 8 weeks ago and asked that question. But I actually did that a lot too at my dad's suggestion. My dad always told me to sit in the front, which also helps me not like be on my phone or whatever during class. And then my first year, my calculus professors, my physics professor, my English professor, I think they were probably all sick of me because, especially calculus, I'd have to go in there after every C or a D I was getting on the first few tests I had in those classes. And then also when I got into econ, I just really found that I liked a lot of my econ professors. And that was some part of my decision is I honestly just didn't vibe with my engineering professors. I'm sure they're all great, but I got to the econ professors. I was like, these dudes are cool. I want to be like them.
let's take a second to hear from one of our amazing sponsors that supports the show. Ever wonder how to keep your AI models not just smart, but responsible and effective? That's why I've partnered with Aporia. Their AI performance platform offers full-scale observability and real-time AI guardrails. Trust me, if you're in the data science field, Aporia's got your back. Don't miss out. Check them out at aporia.com. This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP, HP's high compute, workstation-grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high-performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z8 workstation. I really love that the Z workstations can come standard with Linux or WSL2, and they can be configured with the Data Science Software Stack Manager. With the Software Stack Manager, you can get right to the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show. It's interesting what you noted about sitting in the front of the class. I don't think you necessarily have to sit in front to perform well, but there's so much about how you design the environment that can help you to improve your performance. I mean, I did this in college. It was kind of weird, but I would sort of present myself well in class. I would sit in the front, and the accountability that you have by looking like a good student sometimes carries over into actually performing like a good student. Since I dress like a slob, like I am in my pajamas all the time, but that's a luxury that we have from working from home and a lot of these other things now. But going back at the time when I didn't have as much self-discipline, I had to create these systems to hold myself accountable, for my teachers to hold me accountable, for me to exceed in those settings. I also was, for some reason, unbelievably competitive in my schoolwork. That was a lever that I could pull to make me learn faster, more better over time. And I'm not really sure where that came from. Like I wanted to destroy the curve on the classes I was in, and I probably was not super well liked because of that. But there was some ruthless edge to me, probably from all the sports I was playing. But that's a story for another time.
Not to brag, but I broke a curve. Like I was usually the person that like would go from like a C to a low A on a curve, maybe early on. Later on, it'd be like a high B to a high A or something. I became a good student, but one time there was a. This is probably my proudest moment in class. Is the professor came in. It was like, "Hey guys, it's no worries, but the average on that test it was like a 71 or something, and I got 100 on it." He was like, "Yeah, this is all I could curve it." There was someone who got it perfect. I was like, "Let's go!" And I'll say that because that was the one time that I like just way outperformed. Usually there'd be like my calc classes, gosh, I would get like a 71 and there'd be like six people that would get 100. I'm like, how did you all do that?
So how did you said you became a good student? What was the process of that?
Part of it, I don't know if it's just for me. I think I understand certain kinds of math, especially more applied math, better. But also, it may be somewhat easier. So for me, at least, financial and managerial accounting and whatever math I was doing in econ and management and finance classes, that was all easier for me than my calc classes. And then also my calc professor, who was very nice, and I took him for both calc 1 and calc 2. He was more of a math for math's sake instead of application. So whenever I became a grad student, we would do like different calculus techniques, which I would sound like a buffoon now to talk about. But we would be like, okay, we're going to do a derivative here, and it's basically going to change it to this kind of curve. I'm like, okay, now I see why we can use this. I'm interested. But also, I think between my freshman year and my sophomore year, which is when I switched to marketing, I kind of made the decision that I was going to block out time to study. And if I didn't have enough homework to do, then I would just read textbooks or whatever, maybe try for like 2 hours every weekday or something. Then if I needed extra, I could use that. But that was a big thing. And I think, again, I think business also just kind of came easier to me. Like some people struggled in kind of the accounting classes, and that's just something that worked with my brain. Whereas some other things, like my first English class and my calc classes, just didn't register well with me, and I had to put in a lot more effort.
Yeah, I think something you said there of just reading the textbooks and getting into the groove of things a little bit more when you didn't have homework specifically to do. That was a big eye opener for me. Is that this is going to sound really stupid, but all of the answers are there. They're in the textbooks. Everything you need to know about your homework and these types of things, they are written down in the books. And a lot of the times my professors would say, "Oh, you don't have to go through the book. You only have to read these excerpts, whatever it is." And when I completely stopped listening to my professors and just read the books and then went through the classes and whatever it might be, it dramatically transformed my understanding of all of the subjects that I took. It was a very interesting paradigm. It's just, oh, the books have been written in a specific way so that you go from point A to point B over time. I think I even saw this in myself as a professor is I took some things for granted because I knew them well, or I knew certain areas of math or certain areas of coding better than other areas. And I just assumed it would be easier for everyone like that. The books were a very, a more of an effective one size fits all approach for everyone learning. And just doing that up front made such a difference in my overall studying. It baffles me, that like I would look at the problems in college, and after I read the book, I was like, oh, this is so straightforward. Like they told me the set process I take here. Whereas in class, it all seemed like a mystery. And maybe that's learning style or some of these other types of things, but academics is very, very rarely as complicated as we make it. I think we way overcomplicate things for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think learning style is a good thing to touch on. Like, I think people learn in different ways. And for me, I think varying types of learning as well as repetition works well. So if I'm reading out of my textbook, I am going to classes. Like, I was someone who never missed class. And then I reviewed my notes. Maybe I would go on YouTube and have some random guy on YouTube explain something, go onto Investopedia and read something. I think that would work for me. And even in my analytics career, sometimes if someone told me something once, like explain something, I might not get it down. So I've gotten into a good habit of having a OneNote where I'm just keeping really good notes in there. So that way I can go read it and go read it again. Because sometimes the first time it just doesn't click with my brain.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. Is sometimes I wouldn't even say it's a style difference. It's that the way that it's written in some place or the way that it's described just doesn't click with you. You don't really get it. And it takes two, three, four different resources to say, oh, I understand this concept. I understand gradient descent after I heard it this other from this other definition. I mean, that's something I worked pretty hard on in my most recent course with Jeff, is that we had a way that we would describe it, and then we included all the resources that we used to make a segment on a specific topic. And so if you didn't understand the way that we described it, you had these other ways that you could learn about it and interpret it. And because, the way that I interpret it and describe something might not be the best way for you. It might be the best for some people, but it's good to have that diversity and that 360-degree approach of any topic, which, that's something we learn about ourselves as well. Is, maybe videos resonate most with you, maybe books resonate most with you. I've had quite a few people that are book purists on the podcast. They say, I don't want to learn from anything else. Some people are video purists or course purists. And it's interesting that we all have these differences. And, that goes to say any course that I have might not be good for you. Like if you don't learn well from a course, why would you take mine? If you're better off from a book, go get hands-on machine learning or one of those other books. It's probably going to work better, and it might even save you some money. So it's interesting to see those individual differences, but it's probably more important for everyone to figure out how they learn the best, because why would you waste your time learning in a way that isn't going to be efficient for you?
For sure.
Amazing. So I'm interested in, what are you doing now? How did you go from those first experiences in school all the way to, being a data analyst and working now?
Yeah, so kind of my work history. So I taught myself some of the skills, built my analytics skills, and it wasn't directly through a friend, but it was through a friend of a friend. Was a recruiter for Robert Half, and they were hiring for an anti-money laundering analyst. And yet, I just wanted kind of anything. I just wanted to get going, so I wasn't too picky. And honestly, it sounded kind of like vigilante esque, so it kind of gave me a little bit of excitement. I was like, when do I get my handgun to go like chase down criminals or something like that? But that was my first job, but it ended up being less technical than I thought. So I was kind of pulling data using this old banking software, throwing it into Excel, doing some basic pivot tables to look over customer transactions for a bank to see if they were potentially engaging in fraudulent behavior. And most of the time, I was able to explain their behavior to something else, just be like, oh, this was just a bonus, or maybe it was one of the COVID payments the government sent out, because that's about when I was working for them at one point, or maybe they'd gotten a loan and paid for a house, but it really wasn't. It was not technical enough to my liking, and it was just like writing out these reports all day. I had a daily quota, and just my it again, just another thing that didn't work well with my brain. So I kept learning SQL, kept learning Tableau. I picked up Power BI because eventually I got a interview at my current job, which is Humana, as just a data and reporting professional too, if you want my exact title. And they use Power BI, so I just took a Udemy course that was like $15. When Udemy has sales, there it's you can't really beat it. And I was able to get this job, and now I've definitely gone more in the direction that I liked. I'm using SQL, Excel, and Power BI are my tools that I'm using on a daily basis. I'm getting to do some really cool stuff right now, automating some processes that have generally taken whoever's been in my position a lot of man hours to do manually. So that's always nice to save the company some money. But just getting to use my creativity, getting to solve unique problems using SQL or Power BI. I think that's what I really enjoy. So I'm in a good place right now, and just trying to keep learning things that will better help me in my job duties right now, and then also help me for whatever positions in case I ever switch roles at Humana or what have you.
So before we talk about what you're doing now, did you find any fraudsters when you were Robert Half? Or was it just a shot in the dark still?
Potentially. See, I wasn't crazy. I blocked that out of my mind a little bit because it was like you have to get four of these reports done a day, and it would just my brain would just like want to procrastinate and then stress really hard. I probably did. If it wasn't easily explainable behavior, I would escalate it, which I think was like I would tell one of my superiors that I was escalating it, and I would finish my report by clicking like the escalate button or something in Microsoft Access or something like that. But we did have some, like, there was when we had the COVID payments, like, you could find some fraudsters that were receiving like eight different payments into their checking account on different people's behalf. So I caught some of those. So um, it at least kind of gave me awareness of a lot of the fraud that banks are aware to catch. So a lot of people are like, oh, everyone's getting five of these loans from the government, or not loans, but just the stimulus payments. I'm like, it's actually pretty easy to catch on the banking side. So I'm sure there's a lot of fraud that goes unnoticed, but I think that one they had a pretty good handle on.
Interesting, very interesting. Well, I guess you've put away your superhero, your superhero cape as you moved on.
Yeah.
Um,
I never got a gun,
so
just a laptop.
what the hell? Did they at least give you a badge?
No, it was just me crying at my laptop. Nothing too crazy.
Hey, I mean, I don't know many superheroes that haven't had a low point like that. So, so I'm interested also in TikTok. Can you tell me a little bit, well, just a story about that? It's very interesting. You have, over 100,000 followers there, a lot of really valuable and interesting content. Where does that all start? What's up with that?
It all starts with a out of control God complex. No, I'm just kidding. It actually started. I've always kind of liked the idea of content creation. I've been a big fan of YouTube specifically my whole life, and then I was early on to TikTok among like my friends. Like I got on TikTok at the beginning of my fall semester in 2019, and when I got on, it was still mostly high schoolers, and like most of my friends were still like, this is dumb. This is like high schoolers dancing. I'm like, no, they have something for everybody on here. It's awesome. You got to get on here. And so I got a little bit of experience back then, which I think was probably valuable, of learning how to use the app and edit in the app, just making really goofy videos, like trying to just really dry humored videos that probably no one but me found funny. But that's kind of where I got my start. And then this is really random, but at the beginning of COVID, um, Kentucky's governor would do these live updates every single day. And there started to be some people for real, some people satirically, like worshiping him or calling him Daddy Andy or something like that because his name is Andy. So, like, I made a video with like this trend that was big on TikTok where I was lip syncing. It was like, oh no, I think I'm catching feelings. And it was like me watching Andy or something. And that was my first video that like I think it's the only video pre-data that I kept up. That's probably my first video. But that one, there was even like this group page it got shared in. And so that was pretty fun. And I got some of that good experience and then didn't really do, I guess I was 2020 and I would make some of those goofy videos, but it wasn't until September of last year. I was just like, I think I told my wife, I was like, I think I'm just going to try making some content about some of the things I'm into. So, making it about working from home, about being a data analyst, about working out and trying to eat healthier, about books I like to read, maybe eventually about business because I'm really into that. And I think it was my very first data video. It was just me typing at my computer, and it was just like, oh, when you teach yourself data analytics and now you work from home 10 feet from your fridge and can get a snack anytime you like or something. And it kind of blew up. And then I started responding to comments with videos, which you can do on there. So it'll be like, what do you need to become a data analyst? Or where do you apply to become a data analyst? What resources are out there? And that's kind of where I started. And I'm a very proactive person. So whenever I started getting those first couple thousand followers, I was just hammering through marketing and business books. A couple really good ones that I read was one of the Crush It books by Gary Vee, and then another one was Everybody Writes. And I just kind of decided I'm going to be the person that tells you how to do everything for free. So that's kind of been my brand on there since then. So I just kept learning, like while I've been making videos, just taking SQL courses and Tableau courses for myself just to be able to explain stuff better to the people that watch me on TikTok. And it's just been crazy how much it is blown up in the last, I guess, 14 ish months now. And just overall, so far, like I plan to maybe get into more of an educator role, but so far, like I don't want to overstep my bounds. Like I don't have, like I still have less than 3 years in the analytics space of actual work experience. So it was always important to me not to try to teach stuff that I'm not qualified to teach, but I always felt what I can't teach, I think I can curate well. And that's been a goal of mine since I've been on the platform.
That's awesome. I think in the same way. I guess I've probably been in data science for almost 10 years now. And I still don't feel comfortable telling people, hey, you should explicitly do this. It's more, I'm learning this, or this is what I've seen in my experience, and I'm sharing it with you. I would hope no one takes anything I say as, hey, you have to do it this way. And if I've said that, it was on accident. But there's only, we can really only learn from the experiences we've had. And, this podcast, for example, is a great way for me to learn from the experiences of others. So rather than me just saying something, it's, hey, I've talked with over 100 data scientists, data analysts, ML engineers, data engineers, whatever it might be. And that's where I'm getting this information from, rather than just from my limited experience, which is really at, 3 or 4 companies total, only for around 10 years or whatever it might be. If you look at the breadth of everyone I've interviewed, it's, there's 300 years of data science experience at 50, 100 different companies. That hopefully means more than just me being like, oh, I know everything. That's super useful. But yeah, that's a really good way to approach it. And I think that should be inspiring for anyone else who wants to create content. Is you can curate, you can talk from your experience. Those are completely valid. People don't necessarily have to agree with your experience, but no one can take your experience and your opinions away from you. And I think that's very important for creating content, because there's always going to be that imposter syndrome element. I still have imposter syndrome when I make videos, and I've been doing it for quite a long time. So definitely something that I think everyone can learn from on that front. What is the next chapter? You're obviously making some great TikTok content now, short form content. What do you hope to achieve in the longer run from these things?
Yeah, so in the near future, I'm still focused. Like one of my biggest day to day goals right now is to be learning. And part of that comes with just checking out courses, some of which might be below me, but I really think that it can be just really valuable to go over stuff, even if it's things you know pretty well. So, learning new things. So for me right now, it's Python. I used a little bit of Python back in college, but not much. But I'm trying to pick that up, learning to do like learning about pandas. Again, I'm very new to this, so don't ask me anything about it because I hadn't used that since college. Learning how to like web scrape in Python. So trying to get better for both my job, like my day job at Humana, and then also maybe in the future to be able to assist others with learning that, and then also just taking other courses. So I've been taking Alex's analyst course for a bit, and I've been in his intro to SQL, and obviously intro to SQL somewhat below me, but like if I can get those, I believe if I can get those introductory SQL concepts to be just absolutely second nature, like it's just going to make me better at both my job and as I guess an influencer. And that's a good thing about what a lot of what I'm doing right now and will be doing in the future is it benefits me both for my day job and my night job. But back to your question, since I can jump off path really freaking quick. So keep learning. I'm planning on launching a YouTube page. It's already up and like linked on things, but planning to get active on there sometime in the next few months. I'm still trying to decide a few things I want to do for that, and I'm stressing too much about what's going to be in the background of my videos and the lighting for my videos. But it's going to be kind of longer form versions of my TikToks. I'm going to maybe do some more educational videos on there. If nothing else, just some basic Power BI, Excel, and eventually SQL. So getting that YouTube going just because I want to become as much of a one stop shop for introductory analytics as possible. Like, I've not worked in machine learning ever, so I'm not going to start teaching machine learning in 6 months or anything like that. But I would like for eventually you be able to come to me and with the resources I recommend, and then some of the things that I create, be able to get a pretty good, at least introductory understanding of analytics, and maybe eventually more of an intermediate understanding of analytics.
Very cool. Oops, sorry. Something that I'm interested in. Obviously, you're spending a lot of time learning, a lot of time building. What motivates you to go ahead and do that? Is it? Well, I'll leave that open ended.
Yeah, so I find that like I can be a pretty insecure person, and I think where I find a lot of my confidence and also just it helps with outcomes down the road is with self improvement. So whenever I'm going to the gym regularly, or I'm reading, or I'm learning in any way, I think it provides me confidence because I just know that working to be smarter, working to be healthier. Trying to just be better than I was a week or a month or a year ago. So I think that pushes me a lot. And then again, also for those outcomes, like I really want to help people as much as I can. Like I want to help my followers. There are some ideas I have for like digital products down the road that a lot of which would be free, but like I just don't have the understanding yet of some analytics concepts as well as like the capital to do so. So it's just building towards things like that, and then also just trying to provide for my wife and I. We love to travel, so I it's kind of that. So I guess yeah, I could. I'm just keep losing myself in my head, but just overall, I find a lot of confidence in self improvement as well as it ends up better for me in the end if I am getting better, I guess.
No, I think that's a really valid reason to strive to grow. I mean, a long time ago, I wrote down what my most important values were over time, and one of them was curiosity and just personal growth. I think that that's a perfectly good engine at the core to drive progress in any sense. I mean, there are some people that there's plenty of things that can lead to motivation. Some of them, there's like a light side, which is growth and curiosity and altruism, and then there's a dark side of sometimes just like deep seated resentment or people proving you wrong or proving other people wrong or um, you know there's plenty of ways you can go down that direction, and it's interesting to see what side people choose. I mean, I know there's a portion of me that starts focusing with the curiosity and altruism, and then there's like a also some darkness, a deep seated need to feel like I'm better than other people. And that used to drive me a lot more earlier in my career. Unfortunately, I don't really have that anymore. And it's weird that I sort of wish I had a chip on my shoulder to push me forward like I used to. But I'm also probably a lot happier than I was before. So it's a two-sided coin. But it's interesting to see you have such good motivation to push things forward, especially if you're all relying on the lighter side of things.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the personal improvement. What's your philosophy and your vision there?
Just trying to get better at the things that I guess it's important for me to get better at. So for me, it's great that both my day and my night gigs are analytics based. So the better I get at SQL and just analytics in general are going to help me for both things. Just getting better at the things that are important to me. So that'd be analytics. I've always struggled with getting in shape. I was probably the best shape I was in high school when I played basketball. And I've kind of recently been like, this just is starting to become my most important thing. And like, the difficult thing about it is if you spend 2 hours a day learning SQL, you're going to make huge strides regardless of what you do with those other 22 hours a day. If I eat like a rabbit for 2 hours a day and then go and lift weights for 2 hours a day, and then like I go to a Cece's Pizza and don't leave, that's where it gets hard because you just got to be on all of the time. And especially when things like anxiety and depression come into the picture, it can get really difficult to stay on that. So lately, I've just been like, if I can get this one thing, if I can get the motivation and discipline to get in really good shape, and like I don't care, like I don't need to model for GQ or anything, but at least be in a healthy shape. I'm like, what can I do? And I guess that goes back to just the building confidence thing.
It's interesting you mentioned motivation and discipline with sort of the fitness side of things, or like the health side of things. I realized I'm miserable at using motivation and discipline around personal health. So I think I'm in pretty good shape. I take pretty good care of myself. But the only way I do that is through complete absolutes. So, for example, I don't drink soda ever. I don't. Uh, when I'm healthy, I have to work out every single day, whether it's just yoga or just stretching in the morning. It's almost a compulsion that I have to do it. There's no opportunity for me to not do it. And there's a lot of weird food stuff that I do. A while ago I was fasting, and that's easy because I just don't eat at a certain time. It's binary, and I found that shades of gray for me are very difficult to interpret, or they take a ton out of me. If I, for example, a weird thing I do is every year from the New Year's to my birthday is I go on a 3-day fast. And a lot of people are like, that's crazy. It must be so hard. And it's honestly very liberating because I don't have to think. I'm constantly thinking about food, but I know I don't have to plan the food that I eat, which is a really weird thing. I find that the more when I am hungry and I have to look for food, that's when I make weird decisions, or decisions that are suboptimal for eating. And it's a very interesting thing. I mean, uh, how do you view motivation versus habits, or versus kind of like the binary stuff that I'm describing there?
Um, that's difficult to ask. I think what for me, I think a lot of the difficulty for me is it isn't necessarily like the black and white versus the gray. It's more of battling like my motivation with sometimes my fatigue for whatever reason. I don't. like anxiety diagnosed. Who knows what else is going on up there? But like I struggle with chronic fatigue sometimes, so it just makes it hard for me to do a lot of stuff, especially that isn't like just on my couch. So it comes a lot with like prioritizing things because I'm always very motivated. I don't think there's anybody that's more motivated to do things than me. And then whenever I'm not tired, nobody does things more than me that I know. But it's just prioritizing things. And sometimes on those days that I just don't have the energy, just being like, okay, today's a work day, so I need to work. And then this is the one other thing that I'm going to try, like, going to get done today. And then maybe if it's a Sunday, which is sometimes my day to focus on other things, Saturday is usually a bit more of a rest day. But Sunday, it's like, okay, I'm going to write 3 LinkedIn posts and record 2 TikToks and then spend an hour watching one of my courses or something like that. So it's just prioritizing things and again, just battling fatigue with motivation is kind of the battle that goes on with me.
I really like that prioritization thing. I think there's always days where we feel like, um, we just don't have it. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to get this done. Like these are the things that must be done today, and the rest we can sort of leave it. That's something I almost certainly need to get better at over time. Um, are there any particular books that you really enjoy on that front? I mean, I obviously have a freaking library full of them, but I'm always interested, especially in someone else who's interested in the self improvement side of things. What do you like to read?
I haven't read this in a while, but on like this was probably like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But the not curse, the subtle art of giving, not giving an F,
You
and
can
that
curse.
kind
It's
of
okay.
goes. Sorry.
You can curse. It's okay.
Okay, if my parents are listening, sorry, but it says like you only have a limited amount of fucks to give, so like you kind of have to be selective with which ones you do, and I think that is definitely it for me. And I think my brain does a lot of things poorly, but it does some things good. Like sometimes, like um, I'm like, I want to post a picture of this vacation. And if I was going with my family before I was married, or if I'm going with my wife now that I'm married, I'm like, do not send me 50 pictures. That's not something I can care about. I need you to send me one and I'll post it. I'm not going to think about if I look good in it or not, or something like that. But that's a really good book. Kind of just, and I recommended this recently on a different podcast, but there's another book I just love overall that's called The Third Door by Alex Benayan. Any chance you've heard of that?
I've read it actually.
Oh, I love that book. It is so simple. It's basically like, I think it's just a great book if you're trying to accomplish some kind of success. And it's really, I kind of have this thing. I don't know if I should. Do you want to explain the concept of that book, or you might be able to better than I, or I can try to?
Yeah, the idea is that there's, if I remember correctly, usually people think that there's just a front door and a back door. So the front door is, let's take data science jobs, right? The front door is like applying to all these jobs um, through the portal and trying to get a job through that way. The back door, which has less people, usually easier to get in, is hey, maybe we're going to apply directly through the recruiter by sending messages or something along those lines. But there's very often a third door, which is a workaround for all of those things. Maybe that's a referral from a friend. Maybe that's something that um, you've worked really hard on creating a specific product, and you sell that product to a company. And in order for them to get access to that model or that infrastructure, they would just hire you because they have access to it, right? So there's this third way in that generally people haven't thought of, that is a road less traveled. Sometimes it's harder to access because you have to build something or you have to have some connection, but there's often another path that less people have charted that has even fewer barriers to entry, but you have to be more creative. I think that was the gist of it.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Uh,
I would say, yeah, that third way in usually, in my mind, requires some combination of creativity and grit to get into. And That book really kind of curved my mind. Like, it's kind of a weird phrase, but I'm always like, there's a world in which this outcome happens. So maybe I have an interview for just my dream company. Like, Disney is a company I'm passionate about. So, say I had an interview to work for Disney. I will be preparing for an interview, and literally, I'll say something to my wife like, there is some combination of words in a certain order that I can say on this 30-minute call that are going to get me that job. It's just about finding those words and putting them into the correct order. Or, I don't know, maybe when I start my YouTube, it's like, okay, there's a posting strategy and a content style, and maybe all of these different things that are going to lead to me being successful with that and help me maybe, again, provide more for my family or build up more capital to be able to build some of the ideas that I have. So that's the book that I recommend the most. I've even bought it for a couple of friends as part of their like wedding bachelor gifts.
Wow, that's a good one. Yeah, I think that's pretty similar to, I forget what book it was in, but or maybe it wasn't even one of his books. But Tim Ferriss talks about this concept of creating your own category. So if he's saying you make a podcast or you make a YouTube channel or whatever it might be, rather than existing in a category with someone else, let's say the data science or data analytics niche, building your own completely different category is going to be more profitable and better in the long run because you have no competition. And if you have no competition, you can grow in a very unique way. I think, for example, Mr. Beast created a specific category and he owned that category. Now there's people copying him. But it's very interesting to see how if you just dominate a domain that no one else has thought of, it's way easier to succeed rather than fighting in a domain where there's a lot of other like big fish in that space. Uh, it's funny. The book that I give everyone is called The Millionaire Fast Lane, and it has the stupidest title, but it probably has some of the most useful advice about like business and entrepreneurship and sort of life philosophy that I think is out there. Um, but I will. I should reread the Third Door book because it really was pretty good. Um, I'm also interested. We talked a little offline. You know, there's sometimes we talked about both of us getting overwhelmed when we have a lot of decisions, when we have a lot of stuff to do to make our lives better or to improve ourselves. Can you talk a little bit about that paradox? You know, we try to make ourselves better and we create order in our lives and we add structure, but sometimes the structure creates complexity and it's even more anxiety inducing.
For sure, and again, I get overwhelmed. I don't know if again, I'm against diagnosing yourself with mental stuff, but there may be stuff going on that I need to further check out about myself. But I could definitely get overwhelmed. Again, it often comes when I have a lot of my big goals, which is pretty much all the time, but then I don't have the energy, or maybe sometimes it's with like some ambiguity involved with accomplishing these goals. Like, again, for my YouTube channel, I think the thing that my biggest barrier I'm going to have to break through is like figuring out the lighting in the background. And I bet it's 30 minutes of YouTube videos in all reality to like me figure that out. But there'll usually just be something ambiguous that is getting in the way. And sometimes my wife, honestly, is really helpful. Like, if I'm stressing about some house task that's usually mine, like some kind of cleaning, because we kind of split the chores pretty much 50-50 around the house. I'm like, this one thing is like giving me a mental block. Do you mind to help me do this just so I have someone to talk to and I could just get that out of my head? So I guess that's one way I go about it. But I definitely struggle a lot with highs and lows about myself when I am going through those less productive time. I think I definitely link my productivity way too much with my self worth. So in this therapy session, that's probably something I'm gonna need to start working on myself.
Well, so how do you set goals? You know, you said that there's some issues with ambiguity there. That's something I find particularly interesting.
Um, I probably need to use more of like that SMART method kind of goals. I kind of just have some things in my head, like again, for learning data skills and checking out the courses. Usually I'm just like, if I can spend this amount of time, I'm happy with whatever practice or whatever progress I do in that amount of time. For working out, it's just, or like for getting in shape, I do measure my calories and my weight and my protein. Those are probably the three big things I measure. And I don't really have a set goal. It's more on, I guess this is more of an atomic habits thing, kind of just focusing on the processes. And I'm like, if I am going to the gym 3 to 4 times a week and I'm eating in this much of a deficit, and I have these nutrients and I'm hitting these protein numbers, like I'm probably going to have a good outcome, but like I think I put forth at least a good amount of effort for that. So I probably need to be a little, again, therapy again. I probably need to be a little bit more intentional about goal setting than I am, because it's just kind of I know what I'm aiming towards, and usually it's like things that aren't that specific. Like I want to be smarter, and there's really no how much smarter do you want to be.
So, I read some really interesting research a little while ago. It's in this book called The Genius of Athletes. And it kind of blew my brain up because I was under the impression that SMART goals were the only way to go. But they actually recommended having more vague, open ended goals the further they are away. So let's take Kobe Bryant, for example, someone who I've been studying a lot recently. His goals growing up were to be the greatest basketball player of all time. Although that seems crazy and overwhelming, it's actually pretty vague because how you choose to define it is open ended. It could be that could mean scoring the most points. It could mean winning the most championships. It could mean having the highest player efficiency rate, whatever, however you want to define it. So in the short term, there's actually relatively little pressure on you to achieve that goal because it is open ended. If he instead said I wanted to win 7 championships, so I'd have more than Michael Jordan, that is way more overwhelming because you have to first win the first championship. You have to go through all of these seasons in the NBA. If you're playing 20 seasons, you have to win essentially 7 of 20 of those seasons, which could be like the more specific you get, the further you are, the more overwhelming it becomes because then you have to have all these tasks in order. But the closer we get to the present, the more specific we get, the better. And that was really interesting to me because I was always under the impression, oh, I have to set this super specific goal far out. And that surprisingly took a lot of pressure off of me because I used to put these goals way out there that were super specific. And I realized that I would literally never, it just felt impossible to attain them, even though they might have been feasible. But that was a really interesting construct that I saw that I don't know if I'll personally change anything yet, but I think it's something that is, you know, uh, very been very high in my prioritization in terms of um, goal setting thoughts. So
Yeah, I'm doing something right, so eat it, Ken.
yeah, exactly. I think you're doing a lot of things right.
Oh, sweet. That means a lot, for real.
No, I mean it's true. I don't think you grow an audience. I don't think you know you learn as much and grow as much without doing at least some things right. And it's all part of the fun of the process as well. I think that you do a good job of thinking about the process and putting the steps in place. Something that I also think is interesting is both of us create content that people consume. Uh, I asked you offline what's an important truth that many people probably don't agree with you on. And you had said that it's actually hard to change people's minds. Can you expand on what that means?
Yeah, this is there. I know because I've read about it that there's data about this, but also just from an anecdotal standpoint, like there's been enough political arguments at Thanksgiving and um, different kinds of discussions, and even myself over time I've like changed opinions on various things that at one point I would look at people that have my opinions that I currently do now. I'm like, what are they even thinking? Like, it truly baffled me. Like, I'm like, the evidence all seems to point in my direction. So what on earth are they thinking? Because like, there's got to be something going on. Like, I don't think I'm on a higher foundation of consciousness. And then now that now it's easy for me to like look back the other way. I'm like, empirically, I'm correct. So like, it's even hard when there's data present because I think a lot of people can find the data that can somewhat, whether realistically or deceptively, prove what they believe.
Yeah, I think we see this particularly in our own field. I mean, for better or for worse, I think everyone, this video might be a little bit different, but everyone who watches a video on YouTube, I'd say the majority of them, especially if it's related to learning or how to approach this field, they're just looking for a video that confirms or affirms what they're doing. And it's hard for them to justify or to be honest with themselves and take videos for face value to say, hey, this person has collected the data, this person has looked at this through their own lens as objectively as possible. And even though I might not agree, there might be something to that. I mean, I probably have that issue as well. But I also recognize that anything that I generally say in my videos, it could be wrong. I mean, there's some things like getting a master's degree, right? Some things that I've talked about not necessarily being important, where people will vehemently disagree. And for better or for worse, I can see it both ways. I mean, I think that there are absolutely reasons to get a master's degree. I also think that there's pretty good reasons in terms of cost that a master's degree might not be worth it if it's exchanged for hard work in a specific directed outcome. So there's a lot of opportunities for myself to continue to work on this as well. Um, is that something you see in your work? How do you get around that?
Um, could you kind of restate your question? I'm sorry.
Is that a similar like a similar like trend that you see with the things that you create, where people generally like to watch to be reaffirmed of something? And if
Yeah.
that's the case, how do you create content that is hopefully able to challenge people effectively so that they're more willing to reevaluate their beliefs?
Yeah, so I don't think this is something that I deal with currently a lot with content creation. For my for what I talk about a lot in my videos, if you're on like data analyst, TikTok or LinkedIn, a lot of what I say is pretty consistent with everybody, like how you should learn SQL, a data viz tool, and a spreadsheet tool, and then focus just really hard on those generally for your first job. Um, I'd say I don't know if this is 100% related, but I don't love sometimes when content creators that I even enjoy might present something as objective when there's actually differing opinions on that. So, like, um, I don't want to go into an example because someone will feel like I've called them out. But sometimes people are like, "Oh, you have to do this with your syntax in SQL," and it's like you make a really good point on why someone should do that, but there are some other people that will like laugh at you if you write your syntax like that. But like it's presented by fact. For me, a lot of the people that follow me are trying to create a better life for themselves and are trying to maybe start in a new field. They want to make more money. They want to work from home. They want to create a better work life balance and a better life for them and their spouse and their kids or their parents or domestic partner or whatever family structure. Um,
For
so
their dog?
yeah, their dog. They want to get their dog like the nicest dog bed there ever was, and so I think you're not doing as much changing the minds whenever what you're saying is generally positive and full of hope. So, like a lot of my message is you can teach yourself data analytics. I would argue you can teach yourself fully enough to get an entry level job using entirely free resources. You'll have to be a little crafty towards the end. And then the hard part, in my opinion, comes when you're actually just trying to get that job. But at least on a skill standpoint, you can teach yourself these really cool skills for free. But then I'll come in like right after saying that, like, let me be 100% clear. You're as like some people who might, I don't know, sell something will be like, here, you can become a data analyst in 4.5 days. Just follow this 30 minutes a day SQL plan, and Apple is going to give you $112,000 to come be a data analyst for them.
I gotcha. I
Yeah.
gotcha. So, just the transparency and being as realistic as possible. I think that's made difficult because of the people you just described that are saying, "Oh, you can learn this in a week and then have this crazy job." That's some of the of what I'm describing is, it's I find that I feel like it's my duty to say, "Hey, like I don't think that this is realistic." Like, yes, I think you can learn this domain, but it's also not going to be easy. You might not like it. Like that to me is something that I feel obligated to tell people if I'm the ambassador to getting into the domain that they're choosing. And that to me is a little bit hard when it might not be comfortable for people to hear. And that's something I think we all have to approach in our own way. If it's like, hey, I don't want to be necessarily a part of those conversations up front. I guess you don't really have to say that at the beginning of videos, right? Or you don't have to make the whole content around that. But it's a very interesting domain, is setting expectations for people, and maybe that's something I don't like. We don't really need to do, right? We should be able to discover those things on our own. But yeah, Elijah, those are all my questions. Do you have any final thoughts? How can people learn more about you and potentially connect with you as well?
Yeah, final thoughts. Funny enough, just right before you asked me to come on, I decided I wanted to start checking out some data podcasts, and yours was the first I've checked out. I've listened to a few episodes, and I really enjoy it, and I'm going to be recommending it. I enjoyed specifically, I listened to the one with you and Alex recently, then you and Jess earlier this year, Jess Ramos and Alex Freeberg, for those who don't just know everybody on a first name basis, but all really great. And then if you want to find me, I'm on TikTok, which is my main thing right now, at I'm Elijah Butler. I'm is like the contraption, so it's like I am, but I'm Elijah Butler. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there as well now. I work for Humana, so if you type in Elijah Butler, Humana data analyst, I'll probably pop up.
Amazing.
But
Well, I'll also leave the links in the show notes and the description for anyone who wants to find you.
Oh yeah, but those are the two best places to find me. I have an Instagram you can find through links and bios and all of that good stuff, but TikTok and LinkedIn is what I'm focused the most on right now.
Amazing. Well, again, if you have any final thoughts, let me know. And other than that, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk about data and wherever my mind ran whenever I was answering a question about something else.
No, I loved it. I think, at least for me, that's what makes these fun, is that we don't necessarily know where they're going when they start. And I would hope people enjoy the ride as well, just like I do.
And to any listeners that are listening right now, Ken says that if you buy whatever he sells, you can become a data analyst in 7 days.
It was 7 hours. It's
Seven. Oh man, it's like you have like a Zoom call on a Saturday afternoon, and after that Zoom call, you're set six figures.
exactly. Yeah, just one time seminar for $20,000 will get you a job that. No, I'm just kidding.
And it'll also
Um,
buy Ken his 30th home in Ibiza.
I wish. I'm still trying to buy my first home, which has been a nightmare. So, again, Elijah, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and until next time.